everybody, and welcome to Flavor Text, a podcast where we examine the stories in Arkham Horror, the card game, scenario by scenario, and how they align with the gameplay. I'm CrabbyTerror8, and I'm joined, as usual, by Kevling. Hi, Kevling. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm looking at these people on Facebook who have their Edge of the Earth investigator sets and feeling very jealous.
Oh, that would be me then, yes.
Right. Okay, you got yours.
Mine's all sleeved, filed, everything.
Sleeved and filed, right. Wow, okay.
I even used some of the cards in a game this week.
Right. Oh, okay. So
I didn't quite go as far as building a deck. I don't feel that confident yet. But I bunged a few cards into an existing deck that I played in the Blob event.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. How are the new cards? Good?
Yes, I'd got a deck I was planning to use for a repeat of a Blob event that I'd helped run the previous week and hadn't been able to join. And so I'd got a deck I was planning to play, and then obviously Edge of the Earth dropped, and I was playing Ursula, and I decided to try out that new permanent card that lets you increase your deck size by 15, but then you draw 2 and discard 1 each round.
Oh, right.
So I just did it as a way of getting some extra toys out. I'd built a 29 XP deck, so I was originally hoping it would help me avoid weaknesses, but of course they would not be so kind. But yeah, it let me put a few of the new toys in. Quite a few of the new multi-class cards, like Pocket Telescope, was quite handy. Being able to check out what unrevealed locations were before you went there and things like that. Hiking boots were good, but I never managed to get them into play because I had one of those epic moments that never ever happens. I used Deciphered Reality and managed to get 8 clues in a single turn.
Whoa.
And then I said, right, that's it, everyone. I'm going to sell my collection. This can never be topped. I'm off. Count me out for the rest of the scenario. That's it, I'm done.
It's never going to get better than that.
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with the cards as yet, but I was just thinking, I just finished recording Harvey Walters for the Investigator games, and I'm thinking that permanent where you draw cards and things would be perfect for his deck, because he draws an extra card if he draws a card.
All right, so he'd be drawing 3 every turn then.
Yeah, and he has cards that usually put cards in his deck to expand your hand size as well. But if that permanent does that for you, then you can free up some space for other things. So that's really good. Wow. Okay, there we go. So there we go. It sounds like we're more podcasting about about cards. Welcome to Flavor Text, a podcast about the cards. That's brilliant. But we have a in some ways less enjoyable task to focus on today. But I suppose yes. I'm just trying to think. Do we need to do any? We don't really need to do any spoilers, do we? Everybody knows what we're doing. They know we're on the Dunwich Legacy. We know that we're going to do everything. Everybody should know by now. So, where did we get to last time? I'm just trying to remember. We were doing Blood on the Altar, weren't we? That's where we got to.
Yes, and we really enjoyed that one, and the various combinations of setup and how the randomness leads to lots of different options, and it can play out quite differently, whereas I think the randomness is a bit more of a hindrance on this one we're about to discuss, isn't it?
Yes, and I think it's no secret that this is not. There's not many people out there in internet world who would proclaim this as one of their favourite scenarios. I think we just put it out there at the start that people don't like this scenario very much, and I don't think we did that much either, did we?
It seemed to start off okay, but when we did our practice run last week, it went downhill very quickly, didn't it?
It did, and I think having reflected on it and just thought about the scenario, I can see there's just some things about it that are challenging, but also challenging and fun. Most scenarios in Arkham Horror, the living card game, are challenging, and it's good that they are, and they're fun. But this one, I think, doesn't feel very fun, and I'm just trying to. I think we'll obviously talk about it. What makes that difference, and what makes it a bit less fun, I suppose. Yes. So, yes, this one's not going to be a lot of love in this particular podcast. The beginning of Undimensioned and Unseen is sort of pretty much almost immediately after the previous one. So there's not like a sort of a lapse of time or anything like that.
No.
But basically the introduction is around the idea that you go searching the village. Why you would? We've already a bit of a strange thing. It's like your search of the village of Dunwich has uncovered a number of documents and journal entries and esoteric theories. So that's nice. They're linking it that way and saying you found a whole lot of stuff. And basically, Seth Bishop is the culprit, so that gets called out immediately. He's a minor character in the original Dunwich Horror, but he now is the sort of the main, antagonist. He's the one who's caused, all the horrible things to happen, and it tells you that. So you don't have to find that out. It tells you that, basically, as you're doing that, suddenly the villagers come racing to you, and it's the same thing again. They're sort of invisible monsters rampaging around the area, leaving huge tracks and destroying housing and killing people, essentially. And so the way it sort of sets it up is that the villagers are like, it's back, and whatever it was that killed them fries, it's back, and smashed up the bishop's home like it were made of paper, that kind of thing. So this is very much like a replay of what happens in the Dunwich Horror all over again. So we're back where that story was. And essentially, I don't understand this, Kevling, that we can calm the townsfolk down or we can tell them to evacuate. But I'm not really sure, apart from being a slightly different story beat, I'm not really sure if that does anything. I couldn't find anything, and maybe I missed it. What does it make a difference?
Basically, the only thing it affects is the epilogue.
Oh, the
There's
epilogue.
something in the epilogue about it.
Right, in the epilogue at the very, very end.
Yeah, so it doesn't affect any of the scenarios. It's more just the...
Okay. Right. You're right. If you calm the townsfolk, you get epilogue 1, and if you warn the townsfolk, you get epilogue 2, which is interesting because most people never survive long enough to get to the epilogue. So you just never know. But so I suppose that's nice that they put something in that has a payoff, if you like.
Yes.
Quite a way down the track. But essentially, in terms of making those choices at this stage, it doesn't make a big difference in terms of what they say. It's pretty much the same thing, really.
It doesn't change anything about the scenario we're about to face or any of the scenarios we're about to face. A little bit of a bookend on the story.
Basically, the monsters are rampaging, and there's something about some spray or something or powder that you can use, and that's...
Yeah, there's a lot of mess, and we can't see anything.
So that's the sort of setup. It's pretty... It's fairly straightforward. There's not a lot of exposition. There's not a lot of discussion because it pretty much just goes on from the previous scenario. So it's relatively quick, and then you're in the setup for this scenario.
So then the actual setup itself then. So like I said, this is where the randomness begins. So there are 6 locations, and basically for each of those 6 locations there are 2 different versions of them. So the first thing we do is we take one of those, one of each of the locations out of play, and then we remove one location. So we've got a possible combination of 2 different versions of 5 locations out of 6, if that makes sense. And yes, my brain's not doing the maths on that, but yes, I put 2 times whatever. Yes. So we'll talk about the individual locations in a bit, but then the other element of the setup is, depending on how well we did on the previous scenario, we need to check our campaign log to see how many people were sacrificed to Yog-Sothoth. So oddly, if there are 3 names listed, it's actually you're better off because you're only going to be facing 3.
Exactly. So this is the weird thing about this setup, and it's actually something that people have talked about, is that it's counterintuitive because if you have done really well in Blood on the Altar and you've saved everybody, so in other words, there are 1 or no names sacrificed to Yog-Sothoth, you have all of the broods, you have 2 of the broods actually on the table, rampaging around on locations. You have 1 in Cold Spring Glen and 1 at Blasted Heath, and the other 3 are actually there waiting to join. So the weird thing is you actually get penalized for doing really well on Blood on the Altar.
It's almost as though they think, actually, you're not doing really well. We're going to help you out here. We'll make this one a bit easier for you because you're obviously struggling. Yeah,
I know. But the problem is, when I thought about this, first of all, it's not rewarding people who have done well because it's making it really, really difficult, not based on numbers. Normally, based on the number of people in the party, the difficulty changes. But this is making it really difficult purely because you've done well. And this made me think, actually, you might be better off letting all the people be sacrificed at Blood on the Altar. You know what I mean? You start thinking, am I better off gaming it, letting everyone get sacrificed on Blood on the Altar? So I start this, it's much simpler. Do you know what I mean?
Or the other alternative, as you suggested on our playthrough, is you just resign in turn 1.
Yes, that's right. And a lot of people do that. But weirdly, it could lead to a situation where once you know the scenarios, and this is not the way the story would play out, this would make sense from a story perspective. But if you wanted to actually do quite well in Undimensioned and Unseen, you're better off letting people die because you will have an easier time of it. Which is not
it doesn't seem to work narratively either, does it?
No,
surely
it doesn't.
The more people that got sacrificed to Yog-Sothoth, the more powerful and more multiplied the evil forces would become. You wouldn't face fewer of them.
Yes. Now,
unless they're occupied, and then maybe the other broods are occupied consuming the ones that have been sacrificed, perhaps. I'm trying to put a narrative spin on it there.
Yeah, well, actually, someone commented, Anna Physic, I think, commented that if people aren't sacrificed, then the broods are kind of frenzied and looking for food type of idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't say that anywhere, but there's 2 problems with it. One is it doesn't reward success. And most of the times in most Arkham Horror card game scenarios, you get a benefit from succeeding. You know what I mean? In this case, it's the opposite. If you've done really well, you're going to be really slammed in this scenario. And like you say, you're probably better off just resigning and moving on. But also, like you say, from a narrative story perspective, that's it's hard to square the circle from that perspective, because in a story sense, if you've done really well and you've saved everybody, then you'd have more people in the party, and so therefore you're more likely to succeed, from a story perspective. So I guess they were probably trying to do what you said, which is to help people who weren't doing so well. But I think it kind of has unintended consequences, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it came up during playtesting that people who had a really hard time in Blood on the Altar, and then they went into this and it was hard as well, and it was really demoralising, affecting the story in the wrong way, but just to improve the player experience.
Yeah. So I think it causes a lot of. I mean, it's one of the reasons people kind of hate on this scenario is for that reason, is that it feels like you're being punished for doing well. So this is not from a play perspective, and there's not really, like you say, a narrative justification for it. So it's not like if one or fewer names have been sacrificed, something like the broods are going crazy with no sacrifices. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's all it needed, just a sentence. It's not as if there was short of space on the page. Look, there's a whole bottom corner of the page completely empty. They've got plenty of space.
Yeah. So that for me was just kind of doesn't quite work. Yeah. Anyway.
And in terms of the rest of the setup, we all get an extra weakness at that point: madness, injury, or pact weakness. You set aside the esoteric formula. If you have the powder of Ibn Ghazi, then you put it in your deck. You put it in play, and you start with it in play. So that's your added bonus from the previous scenario, which, as we found, is odd that they don't include that standalone wise, but I guess it makes sense that you haven't had that conversation or discovery previously.
Yes, exactly.
But then again, how did you get here, and why are you looking for these creatures?
Yes. So it's a little bit like Blood on the Altar, in the sense that you've got these random locations, and there's two versions of everything. So you've got these other versions which sit aside, which do play a role actually in the game, quite an important role in this particular scenario as well. So it's not like you set them aside and just ignore them. They do have a role to play as well. So
so you've got these 6 locations. They're all randomized, random pairs. And then the other mechanic that gets introduced in this one is the idea of random movement. So we'll be facing the boys, the Broods of Yog-Sothoth, and they will move in a random location. So it's quite a nice mechanic actually. They suggest you put the versions of the locations you aren't using, you set them aside as your sort of random selector deck. So you just shuffle that deck to reveal a random card to determine where they are going to move to, which is quite nice, because otherwise you'd probably be faffing around with dice and all sorts.
Yeah, it is a nice, and I guess what they're trying to do is, give the Broods their own way of moving around, but also they're supposed to be invisible, and they're supposed to be, you can't necessarily know where they are. So it's putting a sort of a level of unpredictability into their movement as well. Because you never quite know where they're going to move to.
And as you said when we were playing last week, you do have to suspend your disbelief somewhat, because we, as the game players, can quite clearly see where the Broods are, because they have cards and they are moving around, and we are physically moving them ourselves. But we've got to pretend we don't know they're there.
Yes,
we can't see them.
Yes, it's a bit hard to play with invisible creatures when you actually have to move the invisible creatures around. So. And these Broods are no pushovers. Interestingly, they're not elite, but they are no pushovers by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, the fact that they're not elite does actually help out in some areas, because there are some cards that help you deal with them quite easily. It's just they are still tough fellas, aren't they, with their 6 fight?
Yeah, 6 fight, and then their health does ramp up with the number of people, so it's going to be between 2 and 5, I suppose. But the problem is 5 doesn't, and they've got 3 evasions, so they're not too bad. But the main thing is you can't damage them except using the esoteric formula. So you can't use conventional weapons.
Yeah, I think that's where the likes of Waylay have become quite popular in this scenario for the Survivor class, because that lets you evade and defeat a non-elite monster with just 2 evade tests.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, on Arkham DB, you probably saw it too, right? There's a lengthy list of cards that you can use to deal with the Broods. There's things like Mind Wipe, for example, that sort of take away all the text, and there's I'll See You in Hell, and there's the Disc of Itzamna level 2. There's all kinds of ways to actually deal with them. The problem with that again is that if you know that, then you would leave Blood on the Altar, and you could sort of game your deck in ways to kind of, which again is not to do with the story, it's just to do with then dealing with the Broods. Again, that's not ideal. You don't really want people just putting cards into their deck just to kind of deal with this one monster in one scenario kind of thing. It's not ideal, really. Okay, so we've got these broods moving around in these different locations, and they can only be attacked using the esoteric formula. So shall we talk about the locations themselves, because they're quite interesting?
Yes, yeah. So as we said, there's a different pairing of each location, so random choice of one or the other. I don't know what order you want to do this. I've got the cards laid out in front of me in alphabetical order. I also have my notes. How do you want to do this?
Oh, just choose one, Kevling. Just choose one.
Blasted Heath first, then. Let's go with Blasted Heath. We'll go with alphabetical. So, given the name of the podcast, we ought to do the flavour text.
Yeah.
The summits are too rounded and symmetrical to give a sense of comfort and naturalness, and sometimes the sky silhouettes with a special clearness the queer circles of tall stone pillars with which most of them are crowned. So that's another quote from the Dunwich Horror.
Yes, it's nice. It's really nice the way they keep. It's one of the best things is that they keep linking it to the every. The location is not just some dreamed up location. They've actually taken the time to find these locations.
And I think every location has a Dunwich Horror quote on it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Great. It's great. And this is typical Lovecraft. How long is that sentence? And actually, listening to it, I still don't know quite what it means. I have to read it again, because then that's Lovecraft all over. He loves these sort of overdone kind of sentences that kind of leave you going, oh, what? I better read that one again.
Yeah,
this is no exception. Yeah, brilliant. Blasted Heath, yeah.
So, in terms of the two different versions of Blasted Heath, there are, there are two, obviously. One is a 3-shroud, 2-clue location with the forced effect of at the end of your turn, if you're here, take a damage, with a flavour text of a dense yellow mist, like a terrible miasma, permeates through this region. It crawls around your skin and causes your lungs to tighten. So I guess that explains why you will be taking damage if you stay there too long. But then the other version is 4 shroud and 3 clues, and then in a player window action, you can lure the creature into a patch of sand. Investigators in Blasted Heath may, as a group, place up to 2 of their clues on an abomination enemy in Blasted Heath. Group limit once per game. And the flavour text there is, the ground here is loose and barely supports your weight. So basically, you're luring the creature into sand. So obviously, you can actually see its footprints. I guess is the narrative there.
Yeah,
and you can attack it because you finally know exactly where it is.
Where it is, and you're putting clues on it. So the clues help because the esoteric formula you get +2 willpower for each clue on the attacked enemy. So essentially, you're adding 4 willpower if you put 2 of your clues on. So you're really helping. Because there's 6 fights, so you would need, it's really helping from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I was going to say each of these almost all of these locations are in a similar pattern, really. One of them will give you an option of helping you defeat the boys, whereas the other one will either be a positive or negative effect on you. We'll probably talk about it later, but when we had our playthrough last weekend, I think we drew almost all of the locations that didn't give you any benefit on attacking the brood. So we really, really struggled. We had very limited. I think we only had 2 locations. I think that let us put clues on, and due to the randomness, they just weren't going there.
But it's an important point to make because they are really quite different. A number of them. Now I've got Cold Spring Glen here.
Okay.
And this has the flavour text. Gold, he gasped. I tell 'em not ter go down into the glen, and I never thought nobody drew it to them tracks. And that smell, and the whippoorwills, and screeching down there on noonday. Oh, jeez. This is H.P. Lovecraft trying to kind of...
Yeah, so what accent was that, Robin?
That sounded... God knows what that was. I've heard this on audio, and it should be an American accent. I don't know what I did then. That was something.
I think there was a bit of Cornwall, a bit of Norfolk.
It's a bit of everything. It was it was an abomination. That's what it was.
I'll place 2 clues on it to help me deal with that later.
And again, the nice link to the Dunwich Horror. And again, these two are quite different. One of them is a 2-shroud with no clues on it. Each enemy at Cold Spring Glen gets -1 evade. Okay, so easy to evade. It has a reaction trigger after Cold Spring Glen is chosen as a random location. An investigator in Cold Spring Glen tests 3 agility. If successful, choose a different random location. So basically, that's saying that if you were doing that because a brood was going to move to Cold Spring Glen, you can actually stop it from moving to Cold Spring Glen, basically.
Yeah, and then you've got a bit of flavour text there that gives you the narrative as to why that works. The thick shadows and crowded trees make these woods a good hiding place. So you can hide out there. There's no benefit in this location because you can't throw clues on. So you may as well hide and encourage the boys to go elsewhere.
Yes. The other one is a 3-shroud and has 2 clues. Each enemy gets the -1 evade again. This has a fast player window here that you can lure, again, a bit like the other one, you can lure the creature into the dense tree cover. It becomes tangled, and then you can put 2 of your clues as a group on the abomination enemy group limit once per game. So that's Cold Spring Glen.
Oh, we get no narrative on that one. No flavour text.
No, obviously there's not enough room or something. Oh, maybe just they could have put something like "Oh dear," H.P. Lovecraft.
Right. So next we have Devil's Hop Yard. Another Lovecraft quote. Still others try to explain the Devil's Hop Yard, a bleak, blasted hillside where no tree, shrub, or grass blade will grow.
Yes.
So again, we've got 2 different versions. We have a 1-shroud fixed 2 clues. And as a fast action, you can lure the creature into the thick fog. An investigator in Devil's Hop Yard may place up to 2 of his clues, blah, blah, blah. So, no narrative again, no flavour text on that one. And then the other one is 2-shroud, but 1 clue per investigator. Player window action, the creature follows you into the mud. Each investigator in Devil's Hop Yard may place one of his clues. So the other one's 2 clues, this one's 1 clue. Group limit points again. So that's the only pairing of locations, I think, where both versions let you lob clues onto the monsters.
I don't understand why they just didn't make them both about the mud, which kind of fits with Devil's Hop Yard, why one had to be about thick fog and one's I guess 2 clues versus 1 clue. So they're trying to sort of say that the mud isn't quite as effective as the thick fog or something.
Yeah, and I guess that, and there is some flavour text on the mud version about a recent downpour has made the hop yard muddy and difficult to slog through, whereas... So I guess that's the idea of having different versions of the locations, even though they will both help you in your fight, they help you in different ways based on the current circumstances, I guess.
Yeah, okay. And then I've got here 10-acre meadow. The trees of the frequent forest belts seem too large, and the wild weeds, brambles, and grasses attain a luxuriance not often found in settled regions. At the same time, the planted fields appear singularly few and barren. This is quite a variable area, isn't it? It's got Devil's Hop Yards and Blasted Heaths and 10-acre meadows. So these ones are, again, we've got different versions. There's a 3-shroud with just 1 clue location with a fast action. You can lure the monster into the rain, place a clue from the token bank on an abomination enemy. And then at the end of the round, remove the clue from that enemy, so it's only a kind of a one-off thing. But you can still only do that once a game. You can't do it once a round or once or something. You can once per investigator. And then the other one is 2-shroud with 3 clues. Player window. You set a bait using a live animal. Each investigator at 10-acre meadow will place 1 of his clues on an abomination enemy. So 10-acre meadow doesn't seem to be a great place to put clues on abominations generally.
No, and obviously I was wrong on that previous location. This is the second location where both versions let you put clues on the abomination. So I think it's just those 2. I'll probably be proved wrong on the next card.
And no flavour text at all on those. There we go.
No, nothing. That's quite disappointing. Right, it's me again now, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So Dunwich Village I've got next.
Yeah.
It's always a relief to get clear of the place and to follow the narrow road around the base of the hills and across the level country beyond till it rejoins the Aylesbury Pike. Afterwards, one sometimes learns that one has been through Dunwich. So it's like it has absolutely no impression on your mind at all as you go through it. You don't even realise it was there.
It's there, yes. And it's kind of place you wouldn't want to stop at anyway. Yeah.
And this is the area you would start at. So both versions of this card have the resign action of you hide from the creatures. Version 1 is 3 shroud, 1 clue. As a player window action, you can borrow some hounds to track the creatures by scent. And that is an investigator may place 1 of his or her clues on any abomination in play once per game. And the other version is 2 shroud, 3 clues. As an action, you can move a brood of Yog-Sothoth enemy once towards Dunwich Village. And then we have the flavour text that explains that ringing the church bell may draw the monsters toward the village if you are brave enough to face them.
So this is an example of where you can have some impact or influence over where the broods move. If you're in a multiplayer game, you could literally have one person who just stays in Dunwich Village and just helps to sort of guide.
This way, bring them this way.
Yeah, yes, right. Yes.
You could have one person in wherever it was. Was it Cold Spring Glen? I can't remember. One person saying go away from this area, and the other person going no, come this way.
Yeah, exactly. It's about the only control you're going to have on them. And then the final location is the Whatley Ruins. It was as though a house launched by an avalanche had slid down through the tangled growths of the almost vertical slope.
I love that description.
And yeah, it looks like it is ruined. The Whatley Ruins is indeed very ruined, looking at the picture.
They're not underselling it, are they, in that
name? No. It's a real fixer-upper, as they say in real estate. And this, again, we have the sort of harder and easier version. The harder version is 3 shroud, 2 clues per investigator. Each investigator at Whatley Ruins does get -1, which, is a problem in this particular game, -1 willpower. There isn't a fast investigator window. You hurl a nearby canister of paint at the monster. So someone was clearly trying to fix it up, Kevling, because there was paint there. So someone was trying, anyway. Paint at the monster. An investigator in Whatley Ruins may place up to 3 of his or her clues. Wow. On the abomination enemy. And the easier version is 2 shroud, 2 clues per investigator. So Whatley Ruins is quite generous with clues. Each investigator at Whatley Ruins, again, -1 willpower. You can test for intellect. If you are successful, move a brood of Yog-Sothoth enemy 1 location any direction. So again, you could use, particularly if you had high intellect, I'm not sure how, maybe it explains why, but yes, you could use that, because I think in the text it says the ancient arcane tomes found within the Whatley Ruins hold the secrets to manipulating the monsters. So in other words, you're someone like a Harvey Walters, you're looking at them and you're managing to make the monsters move around for you a bit more. So there you go.
Although why you can't take the book with you and do the same effect anywhere, I don't know.
Yes, yeah, that's a really, really good point. Yes. So there we go. They're quite different, quite variable, what the locations do. Much more so than we've seen. I mean, we've seen some differences, like, which was at the Miskatonic Museum, there was some differences in locations, but these are really quite different. So, like you say, when we did it, we just found that the combination we got wasn't ideal.
I think it was the worst possible combination.
Yeah. And this is quite a punishing scenario. So you can, just through happening to get locations which don't quite, give you the opportunity to put clues on and that kind of thing. And it's not really offset. It's not like, you're getting opportunity to put clues on, but the alternative is allowing you to control the broods much more specifically. So it doesn't feel like such a trade-off. It feels like the best thing that you can get in every circumstance is the ability to throw clues onto the broods.
And then there are a few treacheries in the deck that affect the brood as well. There's the creature's tracks. You can either choose to take 2 horror or you spawn another one of the brood. There's attracting attention. Each brood moves once towards you. 2 of those. Ruin and destruction. If there are no investigators at the same location as one of the brood, it gains surge. Otherwise, you have to do an evade test. And for each point you fail by, you take a damage. And then the worst one is the towering beast that you attach to the brood to basically boost its fight and health, and you take a damage while you do it as well.
Yes. And they can stack. And they can stack. So you can have like 4 of this. I did read online someone had 4 of them on one of the broods or something. And you know what? I think from a story perspective, that all works. I mean, the broods have a life of their own, a mind of their own. They move around as they want. From a story perspective, it's great. From a gameplay perspective, it makes it really, really rough. Yeah, so there we are. So we've got these locations which we might, you could draw to be, helpful or perhaps less so. You've got these rampaging broods. So, and the other thing is that we can't start by dealing with the broods. That's not, even if there are broods on the table, you can't actually deal with them right off the bat, can you?
No. I mean, narratively, we don't know where they are, do we? Because they're invisible.
That's true, exactly. So before you can even start to take them on, you have to actually get through the first act.
Yes, we've got to get to Watley Ruins first, haven't we?
That's right. So there's the Act 1A, which sort of shows this picture of something sort of rampaging around. It says the monsters tearing through Dunwich County are immune to traditional weapons. So there you go, you can't use traditional weapons. Only by reciting a particular incantation can the creatures be defeated. First, you must search the ruins of Wilbur Watley's home in order to find the final sections of the otherworldly script. This feels a bit mean to me. They've already said at the beginning of this scenario that you've spent this time. Your search of the village of Dunwich has uncovered a number of documents, journal entries, and esoteric theories. And not only that, the other thing that's a bit strange about this, Kevling, is that this is the Dunwich Legacy. So the same people... and a lot of the time you are going to have some of those people with you, the allies, have done this before. This is not like it's brand new to them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yet it's saying all the searching you've already done in Blood on the Altar and all of the allies that you have that had to experience this in the first phase, that doesn't mean anything. You've still got to search again, Watley's home again, for something before you can even start.
Unless they've been sacrificed, you've got them with you as well. You've got those allies with you who have been through the story.
Exactly. So the problem with it is that it doesn't quite fit. It doesn't quite make sense from that perspective, and it feels a bit mean that it makes you find 2 clues. No, 2 clues per investigator is not very much, I know, but it's making you, and you have to get to the Watley ruins, so. You've got to waste probably at least a couple of turns getting there and getting that done before you can even start taking on the broods. However, in most scenarios, the broods will already be on the table, rampaging around. And I guess from a story perspective, that makes sense. They're rampaging around, you're trying to work out what to do. But from a gameplay sense, it really sets you back.
I'll do the agenda. Rampaging creatures. So, and this is pretty straightforward, and to be honest, we've already talked about it. Reports of terrifying entities wreaking havoc across the countryside have caused the citizens of Dunwich to panic. Worse, the creatures seem to be invisible to the naked eye, and the forced effect is at the end of each enemy phase, move each brood once towards a random location. So yeah, we've already touched on that really, and there's no real change there.
Yeah. And so you've got sort of 5... Essentially, you've got 5 turns before the agenda flips, and then once that agenda flips, that's when
another brood will come out.
Yeah, and and it's unlikely. In fact, I'd say it's almost impossible that you would have dealt with the first brood by then. So you could have up to 3 broods. Like if you did well in Blood on the Altar, you would already have 2 broods on the table. So if you've done well in Blood on the Altar, the likelihood is you're going to have 3 broods to deal with.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, that's a lot to
And
to
again,
deal with.
depending on how the random locations turn out, depends on how effectively you will be able to deal with those.
Exactly. And I mean, it's not just that in the sense that, you know, what it says. I mean, obviously on the back of Act 1 is it's, you know, it's that you then have the esoteric formula, right? So now I got confused about this esoteric formula, Kevlin, because I thought it was like a jar with liquid in it, and then I realized it's not. It's an incantation. Why did they call it esoteric? Why did they call it esoteric incantation? Wonder why they called it esoteric formula. But once you've got that, and again, there's this weird thing in the text that if Dr. Armitage is with you, there, Armitage sighs a breath of relief, jotting down the last phases of the formula. I've translated the last of it. He shudders as he hands you the script, the words conjuring forth memories of his battle with the creature. Wouldn't you already know that? I mean, they did this before. They dealt with the Broods last time. Why all of a sudden doesn't he know what to do? Is it sort of different this time? I don't quite understand why they're kind of like, wouldn't Armitage already kind of, obviously if Armitage isn't there, then that makes more sense that you would have to transcribe stuff and that you wouldn't know what things were. But
yeah, that's the second option, isn't it?
Yeah. So you have this esoteric incantation, really. It's not a formula in a sense. And then that allows you to deal with the Broods, as long as the people in your party have reasonable willpower. If you happen to be playing solo and playing with a low willpower person, or even two of you, you're pretty stuffed. You might as well resign.
Yeah, time to take advantage of that handy resign option.
Because that's the other thing about this scenario is that you need high willpower. You need at least one high willpower investigator, you know, a mystic. You know, he can bring out the Holy Rosary and the whole bit and can kind of really do that. Or you're going to need a ton of guts. You know what I mean? Like it really does rely on you having a party with high willpower. Otherwise, you might as well just resign because you're just not going to get there. Yeah.
The other option, as you touched on, is if Dr. Armitage wasn't there, then you basically have to do the transcribing yourself, which takes time, and so we have to stick a doom on the agenda. But then the other thing that annoys me about this scenario as well is when you move on to Act 2A, objective, defeat as many brood as you can. If there are no copies in play or set aside, advance. Now, obviously, at the start of the game, there'll be potentially one in play and a couple set aside, but they only come into play either through a treachery or as the agenda advances. So there's no way of trying to get this scenario done quickly. You've got to wait for the brood to come out so you can then defeat them, which is another frustration, I think. If it was just defeat the ones that are in play, then I think that might make it more manageable.
Yeah, I mean, I've played this scenario where everybody got sacrificed, so there was just one. Both of the broods weren't in play. You literally start with no broods in play,
so you've literally got to wait.
and so I think I was I think I was playing a seeker, so I got the clues quick, and then I was just wandering around, just waiting for something to happen. So it wasn't even like what the story is, where they're supposed to be rampaging. There wasn't anything rampaging on the board. You know what I mean? So it was this weird thing where there wasn't anything there, and I was sort of waiting for it to arrive.
As far as you were concerned, you had dealt with all the broods because there was no evidence of them anywhere.
Also, the enemies tend to get stronger as the agendas move forward, you know what I mean? So if you manage to do things relatively quickly, you get a payoff for that. Yes. In this case, you first of all, you have to find the script, but then you could also have these situations where if you have a strong party with high willpower, you can literally be sitting around waiting for the next one to pop in. It's it just doesn't quite. Or you've got the opposite where you're just overwhelmed and there's just too many of them and they're all rampaging around, which is closer to the story probably. So,
Yeah, I mean, in terms of them getting tougher as you go through, when you get to Act 3, they all get +1 and fight and evade as well. And which might also have been boosted if the Towering Beast treacheries are out as well. So they do get harder, but they've got to actually turn up in the first place, haven't they?
Yeah. But do they need to get harder? This is the thing they're going to be.
They're
by
already
then,
tough, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's going to be.
Not only are they tough, you can only deal with them in a very specific way.
Exactly. Unless you've got these, like you say, unless you've got the cards which are listed in ArkhamDB, and you've got discs of, Examiner level 2s, and you've got mind wipes and things. And again, what's going to happen then is you're going to deal with them relatively quickly. And again, if you deal with them very quickly and effectively, you're going to be sitting around waiting for the next one, which gameplay-wise, that's great. Story-wise, that's not so great. You know what I mean? It kind of doesn't work so you get this real disconnect between, you can either try and game the system from a gameplay perspective, which then leads to a narrative which doesn't kind of work, or it's more like what the narrative actually would be, but then it's really horrible because it's very, very difficult to deal with, right? And so that's probably why it's not so fun, because you either choose to ignore the narrative and just sort of game it, or you get the right narrative, which is these horrible things are rampaging around and it's almost impossible to deal with them. But then from a gameplay perspective, that's awful, and you might as well just resign and hide. You know what I mean? So it leads to a very dissatisfying experience. Or it's going to be very rare that you get a kind of a balance between the two, right? It feels narratively about right, and it's challenging and difficult, but it's not like so challenging and difficult that you just want to resign and give up. Yes.
I'm just looking at those cards listed on ArkhamDB that can directly defeat or discard them. Yeah. Well, there's only two that can directly defeat. That's Waylay and I'll See You in Hell. And both of those cards came out after Dunwich, so they didn't exist at the time it came out. So it's not as though it was built with them in mind. And then
the Disc of Examiner is an instant kill. It's when a non-elite enemy spawns at your location, discard that enemy.
Yes.
So as long as they spawn at your location, they're dead. That's like an instant kill.
And then by discarding them, they go into the victory area, don't they? As if they were defeated.
Yes, that's right. Now the problem with Mind Wipe is that you don't get that victory point if you use Mind Wipe. So Mind Wipe is great because it means they don't have any of the text on them, so you can kill them conventionally, but then you don't get the victory point. And then Dumb Luck is fast play after you fail a skill test by 2 or less during an evasion against a non-elite enemy. Place that enemy on top of the encounter deck.
So again, you're not defeating him, you're just going to face him again next round.
That's what's so dissatisfying about it. There's a real disconnect between what you're trying to do in the game and what the story wants you to do, or the story narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, just reading it again, it is a slight cheat using the discs of its armor and close call, because the criteria for ending the game is if they are not in play or set aside. Right. So as soon as they enter the discard pile or get shuffled into the deck, the game is over because they are not in play and they are not. I see. Right. That does definitely feel like a cheat. That one does.
Yeah, it's sort of game. That's the problem. You end up gaming it. Yeah, Insta Resign is gaming it. That's gaming it. It's just a very unsatisfying. I mean, the thing is that doesn't always feel that way, and it's rare. But in this one, it just feels like it doesn't quite work. It works really well to reflect the story. So
definitely,
it absolutely does. But in terms of aligning that with the gameplay, a lot of the time it's just doesn't quite work. And we found that, didn't we, when we played it again? I just got really tired of it because we had broods rampaging around. And the problem is dealing with the broods is not just the frustration of the esoteric formula, because if the esoteric formula worked from afar or something, because in the story they don't stand near the broods, they stand on some hilltop and then they sort of, intone the incantation. But in this one, to actually deal with a brood, you either have to move into the location of a brood and attack it, and then you're going to get hit because you're either going to have to move away and take an attack of opportunity, or you're going to have to stay there and then take some damage. I mean, they'd hit hard, right? Or you're going to have to wait for them to move on to you randomly, and then they're going to hit you, right, for damage. So the other problem is that I'm not sure, unless you evade them. So I guess you can move in, you can evade them and then do the damage. But there's this sort of weird way you're going to have to deal with them. Otherwise, you're going to take attacks of opportunity. You know what I mean? The problem is, if you move in, that's one action. Then you've got to evade them, second action. Then you get to attack. You know what I mean? Makes them really, really difficult to deal with if you don't want to take any damage, because you're taking two horror 2 damage. It's pretty high. Yeah. So that's the other thing that's really difficult, is just trying to damage the things, particularly when you don't know where they're going to move. It's not like you can predict where they're going to. I noticed online someone was saying it would be great if you drew a random card and say it's the Watley Ruins. The brood then keeps moving one location at a time until it gets to the Watley Ruins. Then you draw again for where it goes next. So you know its path. So you can be much more, you can plan much more how you're going to deal with it, right? I guess the problem with that is
you can see the direction it's moving in.
You can see the direction it's going to move in. I guess the problem with that is in the story they're supposed to be invisible, so you're not supposed to know where they're going. So
no, but in some of these locations, we've thrown paint on them, we've chucked sand over them.
Yeah.
I mean, once they get the clues on them, you know where they are then, don't they? Because of one of these effects.
Yeah.
But, it is a frustrating scenario.
It is a very frustrating scenario, and the problem is it's just not fun. It's just not fun to play. And so it's and the problem is, though, if you do resign, the consequences are quite significant because for the next scenario, because I think you put Doom on to start with based on if the broods have survived or something like that. There's some consequence as well. So. So there we go. Have we pretty much covered the gameplay and all that?
I think we have. I guess we just need to look at the resolutions.
Yeah, the lovely resolutions. Yes.
So if we do somehow manage to defeat all of those rampaging brood, so that would be resolution 2. After slaying what seems to be the last of the rampaging monsters, you retreat to Zebulon's home, exhausted and rattled by your experience. You log that no brood escaped, which may be important later, and you lose the powder because it doesn't serve any purpose anymore. And then you gain the victory points. Whereas if you failed, more likely, if you failed to defeat all of the brood, or you resigned, or you were defeated, you did all you could to stop the rampaging monsters. Yes, I did all I could by resigning in turn 1. But there were more of them than you realised, and you weren't able to slay them all. Exhausted and terrified, you retreat to Zebulon's home and hope to survive the night. So we record that X escaped into the wild. Again, you remove... And so basically there's no real penalty in just skipping it and moving on, other than the potential consequences of brood having escaped.
Yeah, which is in the next one.
I think it's the very
Yeah, so that's the main consequences, I think.
Yes, it just affects the Doom at the start of the next scenario, doesn't it? Yeah. That's why I thought it was quite funny when it said, you did everything you could. No, I didn't. I resigned.
Yes, I resigned.
I turned 1, resigned. I went through all the setup, I did all the random locations, and then I just went, no, resign. Come out of here.
So there we go. There is the Undimensioned and Unseen.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest hurdles on this is just the sheer amount of randomness, isn't it? It's random locations, random versions of locations, random movement within those locations, random as to, because of the locations are random, it's random as to whether you get any ability to deal with those monsters that are randomly moving about. It just feels like too much randomness to make it satisfying. If there was some extra logic in there to steer those decisions as to which ones went into play and such like, I think it might be a more appreciated.
Yeah, and on top of that, if you did really well in the previous scenario, you'll get punished.
You get a kick in the teeth. Yes.
Yeah, you really do. Whereas if you did badly in the last scenario, you find this one relatively speaking. Relatively easily. Yes. Yeah. So I can see why people aren't too fond of this scenario. And I think as we've set out, like you say, there's a lot of things about it, particularly to do with, like you say, the gameplay itself, which I think in an attempt to make it seem, narratively close, it sort of led to doesn't quite work from that perspective.
I mean, narratively and gameplay-wise, there are some good ideas in here about the idea that you can't see the monsters until you take these specific effects, which you replicate by putting clues on them to show that, now I can see where they are, and now I can attack them. But it's just the practicalities don't quite gel, do they? No,
they don't. And I mean, to be fair, this is rare, so I can't think of any other scenarios, and I could be wrong, but I can't think of any off the top of my head that sort of are challenging and sort of there's a disconnect in quite the same way. I think in later campaigns, they're more challenging maybe from how the story is told, and sometimes that becomes a bit sort of overwrought or kind of, trying new things. But generally, the issues that they had with the gameplay itself, and to be fair, this was the first campaign, that very much seems to have been ironed out most of the time in subsequent, I think, campaigns. But this one, I mean, to be fair, this was the first campaign, and so and there's nothing wrong with it being difficult. I think this one just there's just, like you say, there's some issues with it. So there we go. So there we are. So what are we looking at next time, Kevling?
Well, we're moving on to scenario 6, Where Doom Awaits.
We're nearly at the end of this. Is that the final? That's the final. No, the second penultimate.
One more, I think, after that, isn't
there? Yeah. Where Doom Awaits.
Lost in Time and Space.
Yes. So it's getting close to the end, and we'll be running up the hill. We'll be doing a bit of a.
It's that one. I can never remember which one it is from the title.
Yes. We'll be taking a little bit of a hike up a hill.
Bush,
yes, that's right. Yeah. You're running up the road,
aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We are. Will we be running up the hill backwards? Was that a David Bowie song? I think so. Yeah, showing our age. Yeah. So there we go. So I'm looking forward to that. I have to say, because I've died so early in these campaigns, I tend not to know the last two scenarios in a lot of these campaigns because I never got that far a lot of the time. So it's interesting that I've tended to play them a lot less. So I'm really looking forward to having another go and then chatting about them. So yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So
excellent.
Fantastic. Well, as always, that was really great. Even though I didn't like the scenario very much, I very much enjoyed talking about it. And
yes,
and
pulling it to bits.
Pulling it to bits. Yeah, that's right. It's easy for us to be critical.
Oh yes.
We have to design these things. But anyway, that was brilliant. So thank you very much for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And Kevling and I very much looking forward to chatting about the next scenario next time. But until then, I'm CrabbyTerror8.
And I'm Kevling.
I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. We'd very much like to hear from you. If you would like to send us your thoughts, send it to ftextpodcast@gmail.com. That's FTEXT podcast, ftextpodcast@gmail.com. You can also listen to this podcast on YouTube. Just go to Out of Ammo, Out of Time, and you will find it there. And it's also available on the usual podcast platforms, iTunes, Google Podcast, that kind of thing. So if you want to subscribe, go there. But until then, I'm CrabbyTerror8, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye.